Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, January 6th, 2024, and I just put the final binding on this quilt that I started about a year ago, and I thought I would film a little video because this quilt has quite a little story, in my opinion. It began as some vintage Dresden plate pieces, some partially pieced blocks, so this whole circle of feather-shaped, call them Dresden plates once you place it in a circle like this. But I did get it on eBay in a lot that had orphan blocks, which are blocks that are left over that never make it into a quilt. And it had a ton, hundreds and hundreds of these pieces of really cool vintage fabric, you know, some probably just from the 60s and 70s. But they were cut by hand with jagged scissors, no pattern. Some of them, as you can see, are really small and the point is not that defined, whereas others are wider, had more of a point. So I took each block, turned it under, pressed it under, and look, when you look at this up close, I'm a perfectionist. This, to me, is almost mortifying to look at up close. But, you know, it was either throw them in the trash or make it into trash to treasure or any other anonym you want to attach to when you take something that other people would throw in the trash and make it into something beautiful. So it was a very organic improv evolution of a quilt, let's call it that. So I'm going to tell a story. This will probably be a pretty long video, so bear with me. So it started with the pieces of vintage fabric from an eBay lot of orphan blocks and random stuff. When I decided to, a couple of them had already been, now this light yellow, which is probably a poly cotton blend, I don't think it's 100% cotton, didn't seem like it, but it was in pretty good shape. There was no stains to it, and a couple of the circular Dresden plates, let's call them, were already sewn to that like a foundation piecing, but not with paper, with fabric. So that was sort of my jumping off point, and I still have tons of this left over to make another quilt, or just to put it in a dumpster fire, who knows. But I'm super happy with how this turned out because of the angle that I spun with it. So as you can see, I'm a big fan of Tula Pink. I did name this quilt Tula Pink Cameos because if you follow her, she's a young, hip, and cool fabric designer that designs for Free Spirit Fabrics. She lives in the Kansas City, Missouri area, and her fabric, she's probably been designing about 13, 14 years, let's say, with 2 to 4 lines of fabric a year. So there's a lot of her fabric out there. And the earlier pieces, like this and this, not that this one is Parisville. This is a line called Elizabeth, which is like representing like royalty, like the queen. This is called Della Luna, and it's like Sugar Princess. I have that one, and a different face here from the same line. This is from Curiouser and Curiouser, like the Alice in Wonderland thing. This is be the representation of Alice in different colorways. This is from Disco Kitty. This was in a subscription box from Quilting with a yard of this fabric. This stuff went viral because the only people who were subscribed to this subscription box were able to get it, and all the people who hoard and love and drive the price up of Tula Pink, like 1 yard of this fabric from that box goes for about $300 to $350. So one cameo of the cat, there might be 8 or 10 cats in a yard. Just valuable, hard to find, and it was never in print at mass production. It was only in limited supplies for this subscription box. Another Alice in Wonderland, another Elizabeth. So this one's in the pink colorway. This one has a blue background, and this one's lavender. Curiouser and Curiouser Queen in hot pink, whereas the one up here in the corner is in the reds and oranges. And of course, I'm saving the best for last. This little schnookums here was the focal cameo fabric for a line that was called Spirit Animal, and it was super controversial. because of the, you can't really say anything about Native Americans anymore. There's a big controversy about it, whether it's politically correct or hate speech or, that whole line of propaganda. So she was forced, the fabric was released in Australia, and within a week, or I don't know the time frame, but not a lot of time, the fabric was out. Some people in Australia bought it, and then it was pulled. She had to pull it from production. So people immediately got on eBay, ran the price up. I paid $400 for a fat quarter, which a fat quarter is probably about 18 to 20 inches, like, one square like this, which had maybe 4 or 5 cameos on it. 3 full ones and then some partial ones. So you can see in this instance, I took a partial piece of the feather headdress here, and sewed it to what was a partial, and came up with what I thought was good enough. It's sort of an experiment, because this quilt was already an experiment in fortitude and perseverance and vision. And let me tell you, I'm a visionary, because anyone else, I believe, would have thrown this away. I mean, look at this. We're gonna call this the Wonky Dresden Tula Pink Cameo Fabuloso quilt. But I love it. I love it so much. But again, my OCD eye, I had to first turn under iron and then attach that turned under 1/4 inch seam allowance to get each little block with the raw edges taken care of, and then sew them together, get it as circular as possible. But you can see again, like, this is, maybe 3/4 of an inch. This is maybe 1 1/4 inches. So it's as wonky gets. So once I had enough of the one, and then there were pieces, that the partial ones that were already sewn together from eBay were already of a certain size. I didn't take anything apart. I kind of went with what was already started and then built from there. So I had to sort out, like, the colorways. There's some that, maybe have predominantly pink, your eye kind of goes to, I tried to spread out, like, this is bold with red, navy, and white polka dots. So I tried to not have to spread that out. There was a lot of thought. When you just look at this, your eye appreciates it. Your eye has a lot of places to land and a lot of detail to look at, but a lot of thought and creativity went into this. So I'm not sure. Let's see, I have a yardstick. Not even sure what my block size ended up. Let me grab a ruler and see. Okay, so we ended up with 16 on the inner blocks there, and you know what? I went with what it was. I didn't really. Okay, I was able to square them up. So let's call it a 16-inch. Yeah, 16-inch block. I see this one's only 15.5, so no, it's not necessarily. Like I said, it is what it is. When I sewed the rows together with the sashing in between, that's where I compensated and got it to be as uniform and square as possible. And then I added, so this is Tula Pink fabric from, I think it's called Mineral, from the True Colors line, in this fabulous yellow, green, citrine, chartreuse. See how the rings, and they look like the inside of a rock if you sliced it with a rock cutter. Really makes this pop. Let me back up again and get a full spectrum view. Very scrappy, very juxtaposition of wonky vintage with high-end Tula. Doesn't get any more contrast than that, in my opinion. Let me turn on my I have an overhead light here. That my Longarm quilting machine used to be in this room, and I just moved it to a new spot, and I don't need the lights like this anymore because they're built into the ceiling. So this will illuminate it a little bit more, and you can see the quilting. Now this is just one layer of Hobbs 80-20, 80% cotton, 20% polyester batting. We'll talk about the binding, because the binding, in my opinion, was another stroke of genius, just to toot my own horn once again. I did a double binding, flange binding technique, which I have been doing lately, and I don't know that I could ever go back to regular binding. So I do a stuffed binding, which looks like piping, but then it's flanged. So let me just show a little sample of that. So you start off with whatever your flange is going to be. So the flange in this case is the stripe. That ends up being shorter than, I think it's by 1/4 of an inch. So this would be, and I'm not sure I cut this right. I don't know. This was the first flange binding I did, but let's just say you do 1 3/4 inches of that one, and then 1.5 inches of the other. You sew it together with the 1/4 inch seam, and then when you match the edges together, and I didn't do that with this one because I sort of messed it up. I have another piece somewhere that's longer. Let's see. So what I had to do, because of the way I manipulated it and I wanted it to be, it was different. So I pressed it open, and then when instead of lining up the edges to meet here, I lined up to where the fold line was at this pressed open seam. And when I sewed it on, I used a 1/2 inch or 5/8 of an inch so that I would catch this part of it too. So that when on the finished edge, I had about 1/4 of an inch of that flange showing. So you can see in the finished product here, I sew it to the back because no one has time in my life anyway to hand sew bindings, because I just want to make too many things, and I don't want to spend that much time just hand sewing a binding. So what I do is I sew it on right sides together to the back, and then when I flip it, I'm overriding the binding by at least 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch so that I can edge stitch it and completely miss. I don't want that stitching to show here. So this is my binding stitch line way over here. This is just long arm quilting line on the edge, but this is where that binding is going. So when you look at the back of it, and you know, this is just my preference. You do you, I do me. It just looks like a line, like a straight line around the edge, and then the binding just looks clean. So the way it turned out, I used this Heather Bailey, I think it's called Bijou, with the yellow and green and white, and I fussy cut this so that the jewels would be straight on the edge, and that was a chore, let me tell you. Again, it's those little details that you can see as I now where this joined. Where did I just see this? Here. It does change over a little bit, but it's all grain cut to where that for that length of binding, it's not twisting, it's straight. As far as the quilting goes, so the backing, of course, is this, I can't remember the name of it. It's marble something, but it has the teal, the aqua, the citrine. It matched really well with the mineral thing there. And you know, this 108 inch binding per line is always out of print, hard to find, expensive per yard. So I like to make quilts with cuddle backing, but for this one, since it was special and it had all these special things in it, I did want it to have a nice out of print backing as well. And this will be like a summer quilt because I'm in Louisiana, so I have other quilts. Like this quilt is got 2 layers of batting. One has wool because I wanted it to be super lofty and fluffy, and I wanted all this custom. This is the back of the quilt. I have it backwards because there's a lot going on in this room, and I didn't want all this bright color chaos here. But this is 2 layers of batting with wool in it. This is just 1 layer, as I said before, of Hobbs 80/20. But so the long arm quilting, of course, is just custom, free motion. I don't even think I used rulers anywhere on this. It was just all free motion. So I began by just stitching in the ditch around each seam. So again, you know, God, it was really a nightmare, and I thought I hated it the whole time I was doing it. I'm like, why am I spending so much time doing this? I hate this quilt. You know, I think as a long armor, when you're looking at the detail and you're looking at the imperfections, you can't see the big picture at the moment, but then when you get it all done and you look at it as a whole, you're like, wow, that is gorgeous. So again, I stitched in the ditch with the long arm, down each one, back up the other to tack it down all the way around at least once, sometimes twice, because it was, nothing is symmetrical. There's, you know, really would have been no way to do ruler work. It would have taken forever and not been any better than what it looks now. And then when I did the medallions, I pressed them first, clipped about 1 inch into the seam allowance to get it to turn under at least, you know, 3/16 of an inch, 1/4 inch, whatever, to get them as circular as possible. Hit it with a good steam iron, and then did the circle on that. And then I just did minimal around the important points. I didn't want to sew in the faces of anyone because I think it would have lost the effect of, you know, the human form. So once I did that, I decided to do linear vertical here, wishbones. So this is 3 blocks across and 4 blocks down. I have it pinned up to show the backing, but 4 down and 3 across. So vertically, I did the wishbones, ribbon candy, whatever you call it, in each of the first row. And on the second row, I did pebbles. And again, just to conform to, there really would have been no other way to do this, in my opinion, to have it look as good as to do it just freehand like this, wonky, to match the wonkiness. Like, look at this. I got about, you know, I don't even know, about 1/4 of an inch here, and then it goes up to 1.5. Again, it was all determined by how the Dresden plate fell, without, because to pull that out of grain would have made waves and tucks, and I just went with it. So this is ribbon candy here. I think I called this is wishbone. This is ribbon candy, and then again, all the way down the line, I kept the consistency there. And then in the sashing, which is here, in here, I just did a free-form meander of paisley leaves, swirls, and it's kind of my thing. You know, we all have handwriting. This is the easiest, fastest thing that I can get through that looks beautiful, and it just comes second nature to me. So I do it on a lot of quilts in some way, shape, or form. So I call it the swirl leaf meander, and I do the little paisley thing in the middle, and it's just a perfect way to fill in. I do writing with my long arm. Now this is admittedly a little bit upward. It's wonky, just like the rest of the quilt. I marked the center. I handwrite in calligraphy, so I'm pretty good at spacing, but this did travel upwards a little bit, which, you know, again, is okay. And then down here, what I like to do is sign my name, and for this one, since I did the whole thing, I put design pieced and quilted by Monica Daigle Fayro. And I did do this in 2023. I just put the binding on last night, but we're going to count it as a 2023 quilt for my photo album purposes. But I'm super, super happy with it. It's photographing well with the lighting to show the texture. And, you know, again, I'm surprised that this is only 1 layer of Hobbs 80/20. I'm super happy with that batting. No one really talks about that too much, but it's, you know, it's a good price if you buy it in a roll. I've done probably 50 quilts in the last 4 years. I use it in every quilt. Like I said, I did use it in this quilt as the first layer. So on the top layer where this is, I have another layer of wool on top of that to give it extra warmth. And this was such a special quilt that it was massive. It took me a long time to do it. It's the first quilt I ever did that I actually followed a pattern for. Usually I just kind of do my own thing. And I wanted to do the 2 layers, and it's king size. It's massive, massive. So anyway, it's a temperature quilt that I'm working on. I'm going to have a full video on that. I already posted one to YouTube of just the organizational process. And I have it, I was in the bed taking pictures of the Tula pink quilt. So this got messed up, but I'm a little more than halfway, and it's for the city of New Orleans, Louisiana, because it's the closest big town that I can find data on for 2023. Show a quick little picture of that. And this is my secondary sewing room. My long arm wasn't here, and then we built a barn dominium separate from our house. And I have my long arm and all my fabric and other sewing machines in there. These are the machines that the Singer 201 and a Juki TL 2010 that I keep in this house to sew at night and just to have a place here to not have to be so separate from the house. And that's my little setup, just pinned to a cloth here for me to read the organizational chart for how to do this temperature quilt, because it's when you lay it out on the diagonal here from January through December, which is, you know, not done yet, it'll be here, but I'm sewing it from left to right. There's multiple months and days that end up in the lineup for that. So the time that you put toward this is imperative, in my opinion, to have the whole flow process of that work out. But anyway, I'm going to end this video, and I have a bunch of still shots too that I took that I'll post in some Facebook groups, but I did want to have this video so that I can put it up on YouTube. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe and like. Just kind of starting a little channel. Not sure where that's going to go, but I'm not doing any editing. I'm just going to film some moderately timed videos and do some commentary and just go with it. So thanks.